Hey guys, tonight you find yourself standing before a medieval town gate as dusk leaks down the sky like watered ink. Cold stone breathes against your face. Damp straw clings to the hem of your cloak. Smoke gathers in the rafters of the gatehouse ahead, while distant bells toll from a church tower hidden in river mist. Your boots are already heavy with mud, and a horse nearby steams in the winter air as though it has opinions about this entire arrangement. Torchlight trembles over oak beams, iron hinges, and the sleepy eyes of guards who look as if they have been awake since the Norman conquest. Whether or not the Normans have arrived yet, medieval travel brochures really oversold this experience. You take one careful step, hear the sucking pull of the road beneath you, and realise with a gentle but firm little truth that you probably would not last a week out here. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell us in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wait beneath the shadow of the gate, where the wall rises above you in rough grey courses patched with moss, soot, and the old scars of weather. The town beyond is not yet fully dark, only blue with evening, the kind of blue that settles into alleys and makes every window glow like a small, watchful eye. Somewhere inside, a pig complains, somewhere else. A woman laughs once, sharply, then vanishes into the hush of carts, bells, and closing shutters. The gatekeeper's wife is the first person who truly sees you. The guard himself only asks your business with the lazy suspicion of a man whose feet hurt, but his wife leans from the doorway behind him, sleeves rolled, hair tucked beneath a linen coif, a ring of iron keys at her belt. She has flour on one wrist, ash on the other, and the expression of someone who has already solved 9 problems today and is not in the market for a 10th shaped like you. She looks at your boots, your cloak, your soft hands, and the uncertain way you hold your bundle. Then she says you may come in if you pay the toll, keep out of the tanner's lane after dark, and do not ask foolish questions near the well, because the women drawing water there have longer memories than the priest. No one can quite agree whether the town's old well is lucky or cursed. Some swear that a silver pin dropped into it before Candlemas will bring a good marriage. Others say it only brings a wet pin and disappointment, which, in fairness, is a very medieval combination. Still, you notice several women glance toward the well as they pass, touching little tokens at their belts: a saint's medal, a scrap of blue thread, a bent nail meant to turn away envy. You step beneath the gate arch, and the mud changes beneath your feet. Outside, it was road mud, wide and honest. Inside, it is town mud, richer in straw, hoof prints, spilled ale, cabbage leaves, and things best left unnamed before sleep. The stones are slick. The air smells of smoke, river damp, old fish, wool, dung, onions, and baking bread. It is not a pleasant smell exactly, but it is alive, layered, and warm in places, like a blanket that has seen too much history. A washerwoman stands near the water trough, twisting linen with hands red from cold. Her sleeves are shoved high, and steam rises faintly from a wooden tub beside her. She's not young, not old, but shaped by work in a way that makes age difficult to guess. Her shoulders move with steady rhythm. Twist, slap, rinse, ring, twist, slap, rinse, ring. The sound is almost soothing, until you imagine doing it from dawn until your fingers split. She catches you watching and gives you a look that could scrape frost off a roof. You lost, she asks. You admit, carefully, that you are looking for lodging. She points with her chin toward a narrow street where rushlight glows in a low doorway. Alehouse? Unless the alewife has thrown someone out already, then there'll be room. The gatekeeper's wife snorts softly behind you, and you understand that the alewife must be a figure of importance, perhaps more feared than the guard, and probably more punctual. The washwoman returns to her linen. You see that beside her tub lies a small bundle of herbs tied with thread rosemary, perhaps, or rue, or something bitter-smelling and grey. She tells you, without being asked, that it keeps sickness from the cloth. Maybe it does. Maybe it only keeps the laundry smelling like an angry hedge. Even now, it is hard to tell whether many cures in this world heal the body, soothe the mind, or simply give frightened people something to do with their hands. A cart creaks past, one wheel complaining in a slow, broken rhythm. A dog trots behind it, thin, mud-coloured, and hopeful. It pauses beside you, sniffs your boot, decides you're neither edible nor dangerous, and follows anyway. You have acquired a companion of low standards and excellent judgment. The gatekeeper's wife steps down from the doorway to help bar the gate. This surprises you. You half expect the men to do all the iron work, all the closing, all the heavy lifting that songs boast about beside winter fires. But here she takes one side of the great wooden beam, braces her feet, and shoves with the guard until it drops into place with a deep, final thud. The town is sealed for the night. She lifts the key ring from her belt, not one key, but many gatehouse, store chest, toll box, grain bin, candle cupboard, perhaps even the little locked niche where records are kept. Keys matter here. A key is not merely metal, it is trust, suspicion, food, money, warmth, and sometimes power small enough to hide in a woman's palm. You begin to understand the first quiet lesson of the evening. Medieval women are not waiting in corners to be rescued by songs. They are measuring grain, hauling water, judging strangers, nursing fevers, brewing ale, washing linen, managing keys, remembering debts, and noticing everything, especially the things you hoped they would not notice. A bell rings again from deeper in town, dull and patient. The washerwoman crosses herself, then spits lightly to the side, not in disrespect but against ill luck, or so she says. Those who tell the tale never fully agree on whether spitting truly turns aside misfortune. But many seem willing to try, which is a practical philosophy when doctors are expensive and saints are busy. You follow the street she indicated, the dog padding at your heel, the houses lean over you, upper stories jutting like tired shoulders. Rushes spill from doorways where floors have been swept, though not deeply enough to erase the smell of old smoke and damp feet. Behind one open shutter, a woman beats dust from a wool blanket. Behind another, a girl old enough to work but still soft in the face grinds something in a mortar while an older woman mutters instructions. No children are idle here for long. No adult seems idle at all. Your own hands ache from merely carrying your bundle. The washerwoman's hands are still in cold water. The gatekeeper's wife is already counting coins in the toll box, lips moving silently, while her husband yawns into his sleeve. You suspect that if wolves came tonight, she would organize the defense, price the pelts, and remind everyone which fool left the latch open. By the time you reach the alehouse door, your cloak smells of wet wool, your knees feel the road, and your pride has become very quiet. The women of this town have not raised their voices much. They have not drawn swords. They have done something far more alarming. They have continued, hour after hour, task after task, in cold smoke, mud, and hunger, with no applause at all. You duck beneath the low lintel toward warmth and shadow, carrying with you the last grey light of the gate, the ring of iron keys, the slap of linen in water, and the unpleasant suspicion that supper has not yet arrived. But you have already been defeated. You step into the alehouse as though entering the warm mouth of some smoky old beast, and for a moment the whole town seems to exhale around you. The ceiling is low, the beams black with years of soot, and the air is thick with peat smoke, wet wool, onions, spilled drink, and the sour sweet breath of fermenting ale. A fire glows in the hearth, not grandly, not like the heroic fires in tapestries, but with the practical orange patience of something fed by twigs, scraps, and careful hands. Rushes cover the floor, though they have clearly lived many lives before this evening, and your boots sink into them with a faint crackle that suggests straw, mud, and possibly one ancient pea from a meal no one wishes to remember. The dog slips in behind you as if he owns a share in the building. At once, a woman's voice cuts through the room. "Not on the bench." The dog freezes. "Not you," she says, pointing a wooden ladle at the dog. "Him." You realise she means you. The alewife stands beside a trestle table, broad-sleeved, sharp-eyed, and wrapped in a working apron stained by smoke, grain, and honest irritation. Her hair is hidden beneath a linen cap, but several escaped wisps have made a brave attempt at freedom near her temples. At her belt hang a small knife, a bunch of keys, and a pouch that clinks faintly when she moves. Behind her, barrels line the wall like sleeping animals. A clay pitcher sweats near the hearth. Loaves of coarse bread sit beneath a cloth. A pot of pottage bubbles with barley, onions, and something that may once have been hopeful cabbage. You lift yourself off the bench you had barely touched. She nods toward another spot near the wall. That one's dry. This is not true. It is only less damp. But in this world, mercy often arrives in small, dishonest portions. You sit where she directs you, and the dog collapses beneath the table with the confidence of a creature who has survived by never asking permission twice. Around the room, travellers hunch over cups. A carter warms his hands. 2 apprentices whisper over a trencher. An old man dozes beneath a cloak patched so many times that the patches have begun patching each other. Above the hearth hangs a bundle of dried herbs, yarrow, rosemary, maybe mugwort tied with the red thread. The alewife notices you looking. "Keeps the drink from turning wicked," she says. No one can quite agree whether herbs over a brewing vat truly protect ale from souring, or whether they merely give people something to blame when the brew goes wrong. Some swear that a jealous neighbour can cast a glance sharp enough to spoil beer. Others insist bad malt, dirty tubs, and warm weather are the real demons, though that explanation is less satisfying and cannot be spat at. The alewife sets a cup before you. It is wooden, dark from use, and warm from being rinsed too near the fire. The ale inside is cloudy, brown gold, and safer than much of the water you passed in the street. Though safer here is a word that wears patched shoes. You drink carefully. It tastes of grain, smoke, yeast, and the faint bitterness of herbs. It is not unpleasant. It is also not the sort of thing anyone in a polished court would describe as refined unless threatened. "Lodging?" she asks. You nod. "Coin first. Sleep after. Straw by the west wall. Don't complain about the fleas unless you brought better ones. This, you suspect, is hospitality in its pure medieval form. You pay with a small coin from your purse, and she bites it, weighs it, or perhaps merely judges your soul through it. Then she takes a bit of chalk and marks a tally on a board near the barrels. The marks are neat, better than neat. They are disciplined, a little army of debts and payments marching down the board. Her kingdom is not large. It has 3 tables, 6 barrels, 1 smoky hearth, and a roof that leaks over the back corner. Yet within it she rules grain, heat, cup, measure, credit, measure. Quarrels, hunger, and the delicate border between laughter and violence. A man near the fire calls for another cup without looking up. The alewife does not move. He calls again, louder. She turns slowly. "You've had 2. I've coin for 3. You've legs for none." The room chuckles softly, not loudly. No one wishes to become involved. Medieval entertainment is best enjoyed from a safe distance, preferably behind someone larger. The man mutters, but he does not argue. He knows, as everyone here knows, that an alewife may be licensed by custom, watched by officials, tested by ale tasters, and judged by the whole town if her measures are false or her brew is poor. Yet she also knows who owes what, who came home late, whose wife sent word not to serve him after Compline, and which traveller arrived with more boasting than silver. Her authority smells of malt and smoke, but it is authority all the same. You warm your hands around the cup and let the room settle into you. Outside, carts fade from the street. Inside, the fire pops. A candle gutters in a horn lantern, making shadows lean and fold along the walls. Beeswax candles are too costly for such a place. Here the light comes from tallow and hearth flame, with all the fragrance that implies. Your eyes water slightly. The old man beneath the patched cloak snores. The apprentices scrape pottage from a shared trencher with the seriousness of monks illuminating scripture. The alewife ladles food into a wooden bowl and gives it to you with a heel of bread. You eat slowly, barley, leek, onion, salt if fortune smiles, and a smoky depth from the pot that has probably been cooking since before some of the customers were born. The bread is coarse enough to remind your teeth of their responsibilities. Still, warmth moves down into your stomach, and with it comes the quiet relief of being indoors while the town closes itself against the dark. Near the barrels, two women speak in low voices while mending a torn sleeve. One wears a pilgrim badge shaped like a tiny shell, dulled by fingers and weather. The other keeps touching a blue bead at her throat whenever the door opens. Those who tell the tale never fully agree on blue beads. Some say they guard against the evil eye. Some say they only prove the wearer once had money for a bead. Either way, she touches it as if it listens. The alewife moves among them all, collecting cups, settling quarrels before they ripen, nudging a stool away from the fire before it scorches, scolding a boy for spilling rushes into the pottage, and sending a serving girl to fetch more water. The girl lifts 2 buckets from a corner and vanishes into the cold yard with the weary grace of someone who has done this so often she no longer wastes resentment on it. You remember the washerwoman at the trough, the gatekeeper's wife with her iron keys, and now this woman who keeps a roomful of hungry, tired people from falling into disorder. There is no trumpet for this, no banner, no bard will sing of the heroic rescue of the pottage from burning, and yet, if she stops, the room frays, cups empty, men quarrel, travellers go unfed, debts vanish into convenient fog, the fire dies, the dog steals the bread. Civilization, you begin to suspect, is mostly women noticing things before they become disasters. A monk enters near full dark, his cloak damp, his sandals muddy, his expression pious in the way of a man who has come for ale but would prefer it described as medicinal. He carries a little leather pouch at his belt and smells faintly of ink. The alewife greets him by name, but not with reverence. She gives him a small cup and a smaller look. "Guest house full?" she asks. "Pilgrims," he says. "Loud ones, holy ones," he answers. "So loud ones." He smiles despite himself. You notice his fingers are stained black, and you wonder what he copies by candlelight at the monastery sermons. Accounts, saints' lives, perhaps warnings against worldly indulgence, written by a man currently drinking ale beside a hearth. Medieval life does enjoy folding itself into little jokes and leaving them there for anyone awake enough to notice. The alewife asks him whether the abbey bell rang early the night before. He says some heard it, some did not. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the bell truly sounded before matins or whether the wind carried another sound from the river. An early bell can mean a death, a fire, a warning, or merely a sleepy bell ringer with poor timing. The room listens, then returns to its cups, comforted by uncertainty because certainty often charges a higher fee. Later, she leads you to the west wall, where straw has been laid under a wool blanket that smells of smoke and lanolin. The dog circles twice and chooses the warmest part before you can. You're too tired to object with dignity. Above you, the herb bundle sways in the rafters. Across the room, the alewife banks the fire, covers the bread, checks the latch, touches the barrels, counts the chalk marks, and finally sits for the first time since you arrived. For a little while, she is still. Only her hands move, rubbing one thumb over the knuckles of the other. Red hands, strong hands, cracked hands, hands that brew, count, lift, serve, shove, mend, measure, and defend. You lie in the smoky half-dark, listening to the last murmur of customers and the faint drip from the leaking corner. The town outside settles into mud and mist. Somewhere behind you, the gate remains barred. Somewhere ahead, bells wait in their tower, and beside the hearth, in her smoky little kingdom, the alewife keeps watch over the night as if the whole medieval world might sour if she looks away too long. By morning, the alehouse has cooled into a grey, smoky shell, and you wake with straw in your sleeve, a stiff neck, and the dog's paw resting on your cloak as if he has entered a legal claim. The fire is a red eye under ash. The alewife is already awake, of course. You're beginning to suspect medieval women do not sleep so much as briefly pause where useful, like carts at a toll gate. She moves through the dimness, tying her apron, stirring embers, measuring grain, and waking a serving girl with a touch gentler than her voice would suggest. The monk with ink-stained fingers sits near the hearth, blinking into weak ale and pretending this is spiritual discipline. He says a manor lies beyond the town ditch, not far by the road past the mill pond. A message needs carrying there, sealed with wax inside a leather case. The alewife says the lady of the manor will pay a coin if you deliver it dry, and perhaps another if you avoid looking foolish. You accept, because coin is coin, and refusing a woman holding both breakfast and information feels unwise. Outside, the town is pale with frost. The gatekeeper's wife is already at the gate, keys bright at her belt. She lets you pass with one glance at the leather case, one glance at the dog, and one glance at you that suggests she ranks the dog as the more dependable traveller. The monastery bell rings prime, thin and patient. You follow the road past winter cabbages, an icy ditch, and leafless hedges where blackbirds hop like loose bits of night. The manor appears slowly not a castle, though it would like respect, not a cottage, though the wind has found every crack. It stands behind a low wall with barns, a dovecote, and a hall dark from rain. Inside the hall, warmth and draught wrestle without a clear winner. Rushes cover the stone floor, fresh near the high table, older near the door. A long hearth burns in the centre, sending smoke upward into rafters black as old bread crust. Servants move through the haze with wooden bowls, baskets of kindling, folded cloth, and pails of water. A salt cellar sits near the high table as if it knows its own importance. The lady of the manor stands beside a great oak chest, speaking to 3 people at once and losing patience with none of them, which seems almost supernatural. She wears a wool gown the colour of deep moss, a fur-lined mantle, and a linen veil pinned so neatly that you feel ashamed of your entire head. At her waist hangs a ring of keys larger than the gatekeeper's wife's. 1 key is for linen, 1 for candles, 1 for spices, 1 for the storeroom, and 1 perhaps for the strong-box where rents sleep more safely than peasants. She takes the leather case from you, breaks the seal, reads with quick eyes, and gives you a coin. Then she continues issuing orders without truly dismissing you. That is how you find yourself near the hearth, warming your hands, watching the hidden machinery of a noble household turn. A boy brings in a basket of rushes, and she tells him which old rushes to sweep out and which may stay another day. It is not mere tidying. Rushes hold warmth, soften steps, hide dirt, collect fleas, and preserve spilled stew longer than anyone wants. Some swear that sweet flag mixed among the rushes keeps sickness away. Others say it only makes the floor smell less like boots. No one can quite agree whether the herb purifies the air, but everyone agrees bad rushes offend both nose and dignity. A maid presents candles, the lady counts them, pinches 1 wick, and frowns. Tallow candles are for common work. Beeswax belongs near prayer, rank guests, and moments when the household wishes to pretend life is more fragrant. She orders 2 beeswax candles set aside for the chapel, 3 tallow for the kitchen, 1 saved for the chamber where an old aunt coughs through the night. She knows which room deserves light, which task can be done in dimness, and whose illness must not be ignored. Near the chest, a steward waits with wax tablets and a face of practised gloom. He speaks of grain owed, hens missing, a tenant late with rent, and a pig that has wandered into the wrong woodland as though plotting treason. The lady listens, asks names, corrects 1 figure from memory, and sends a servant to check the winter storehouse. Grain, you learn, is not simply food. It is whether spring arrives with hope or hollow cheeks. At the far end of the hall, women sort wool by the fire. Their fingers move steadily through fleece, picking burrs, teasing fibres, laying aside the finest for spinning. One keeps a little charm of knotted thread tucked into her sleeve, meant, she says, to keep moths from cloth. Even now, it is hard to tell whether moths respect knots, but the wool is guarded like treasure, because warmth is not comfort here. Warmth is survival. You are given a bench and a wooden trencher with coarse bread, smoked fish, and pottage thick enough to stand in if it had boots. The dog receives a scrap from a maid who pretends not to do it. The lady sees. She says nothing. This may be mercy or strategy. In a household like this, even scraps have politics. As evening thickens, the hall becomes a world of small labours. A servant locks the buttery. Another carries blankets to the sleeping benches. The old aunt coughs behind a screen, and the lady sends warm ale with honey, plus linen warmed by the hearth. A groom complains that a horse has cast a shoe. She tells him which nail bucket to use and which farrier still owes her husband a favour. Her husband is absent, doing something lordly beyond the smoky walls. Yet nothing here waits helplessly for him. The household breathes through her decisions. You begin to understand wifely power, not as songs imagine it, with crowns and declarations, but as custody of keys, candles, wool, salt, grain, bedding, memory, and tone of voice. She does not need to raise her hand. She only looks toward a cupboard, and someone remembers it should have been locked. Night settles. You lie beneath a wool blanket that smells of lanolin and smoke, while rushes whisper underfoot and the hearth sinks low. The suspicious monk arrives late, claiming he lost his way. The lady allows him a place near the door, not near the chest. Above you, keys click once in the dark as she makes her final round. You close your eyes to that sound, metal against metal, small and absolute. The gate had keys, the alehouse had keys, this hall has keys enough to map an entire life. And as the wind moves through the cracks and the last candle gutters, you realise that medieval survival is often locked away in cupboards, chests, storehouses, and women's memories, and pity the fool who thinks power must always wear a sword. Before full dawn, the hall stirs like a creature waking under blankets. You hear at first in fragments the cough of the old aunt behind her screen, the scrape of a stool, the soft clink of iron keys, the mutter of a servant coaxing embers back into flame. Outside, a cock crows as if personally responsible for the sun. The dog lifts his head from your cloak, considers the moral burden of mourning, and puts it down again. But the women are already moving. The lady of the manor stands near the hearth with her mantle drawn close, speaking quietly to two maids and tenant woman who has come in from the yard with a basket strapped across her back. The basket is packed with eggs cushioned in straw, a small bundle of spun thread, and 3 pale cheeses wrapped in cloth. Another woman carries onions in a sack, while a third has a bundle of rush mats tied with cord. Their breath clouds in the cold hall. Their fingers are red. Their faces wear that medieval expression you have begun to recognise, not misery exactly, not cheer either, but the steady look of people who expect the day to be difficult and have made no appointment to complain. You are given a heel of bread dipped in warm ale, because breakfast here is not a festival, it is a negotiation with hunger. Then the lady sends you along with the market women, since the town road is safer in company, and the suspicious monk, who somehow slept near the door without being robbed or improved, says he must return to the abbey by way of the square. He says this as if it is a sacred errand. The alewife would probably call it checking prices. The half-burned candle from the night before is pinched out and saved. Nothing useful dies easily here. Even candle stubs have futures. You step into the blue hour, when frost lies over the yard and the manor roofs shine faintly beneath a thinning moon. The women adjust their loads without ceremony. Baskets go on backs, across hips, in the crook of elbows. One woman tucks a small knife into her belt. Another counts eggs with her lips moving. A third ties a red thread around the handle of her basket. For luck, you ask softly. For thieves, she says. Then, after a pause, she adds, and luck. No one can quite agree whether red thread truly confuses a thief's hand, or merely makes the basket easier to recognize in a crowd. Some swear that knots can catch evil intentions the way brambles catch wool. Others say a knot only works if the person tying it already has a sharp eye and a louder voice. You suspect both things may be true. The road back toward town is hard with frost at first, then treacherous where hooves have churned the mud beneath a skin of ice. You trudge beside the women, trying not to slip. They walk with the short, efficient steps of people trained by bad roads, worse weather, and baskets that punish drama. The dog trots ahead, sniffing ruts. The monk keeps to the driest part of the lane with the humble confidence of someone who has made a habit of choosing the best place. A cart lurches before you near the ditch, one wheel wobbling badly, groaning at every turn. It is the same unhappy rhythm you heard near the gate last evening, or close enough to feel like a warning. The carter curses under his breath, but his wife climbs down first, wedges a stone beneath the wheel, and tells him which pin has loosened. He argues for 3 breaths, then does exactly as she says. There are many forms of obedience in this world. Some wear armour, and some pretend to be their own idea. By the time you reach the town gate, the sky is paled. The gatekeeper's wife is there again, because of course she is. She checks the loads, asks who brings what, and takes note of who owes a toll. Market tolls are small until you have to pay them. A few eggs here, a farthing there, a fee for entering, a fee for standing, a fee for selling under a roof instead of open sky. The town does not merely wake, it charges admission to mourning. The square lies beyond the gate, still shadowed by timbered houses and the church tower. Women arrive from lanes and fields like streams joining a river. They carry baskets of eggs, butter, leeks, herbs, fish, wool, flax, ribbons, old cloth, pins, wooden bowls, rush mats, and little packets of remedies wrapped in linen. A fishwife sets down a tray of smoked fish with a thump that declares both freshness and exhaustion. 2 sisters unfold a cloth and lay out skeins of dyed thread madder red. Woad blue and a yellow that looks as though it has stolen sunlight and hidden it in wool. The market wakes by sound before colour. Wooden stalls creak open. Chickens complain. A bell rings from the church, marking the hour, though not everyone agrees which hour that is, because bells belong to God, monks, and whoever last remembered to pull the rope. The alewife appears near a grain cellar, inspecting malt with the intensity of a judge examining a confession. When she sees you, she nods once, which feels like being granted citizenship in a minor smoky kingdom. You stand near the women from the manor as they claim a place along the square edge. A town officer comes with a tally stick and a pouch. He asks for the stall fee. One woman argues that she is not using a stall, only standing beside one. He says the shadow of the stall counts. She says if shadows must be paid for, the church tower owes more than any of them. A few nearby sellers laugh into their sleeves. The officer lowers the fee by a sliver, not because he admits defeat, but because the line behind him is growing and no one wants to be bested by poultry before sunrise. Bargaining begins gently, then sharpens. A woman buying onions squeezes each one as if it might reveal a secret. The seller swears they were pulled only yesterday. The buyer says they look old enough to remember Charlemagne. The seller says Charlemagne would have paid better. Coins pass. Eggs are held to the light. Cheese is sniffed. Fish is prodded. Bread is weighed. Every object has a price, and every price has an argument attached. At a grain stall, a quarrel rises over weights. The merchant has a set of little metal measures, dark from handling. One woman insists his pound is light. He insists her eyes are heavy with suspicion. She produces her own small weight from a cloth pouch, worn smooth by use, and sets it beside his. The difference is tiny, almost nothing, a sliver of metal, a breath of fraud. Yet tiny differences matter when winter is long. Around them, women lean closer. Gossip gathers like smoke. Some swear false weights can bring a curse upon a household, especially if a cheated widow speaks the words before a saint's image. Others say the real curse is being known as a cheat in a market where every grandmother has cousins. Even now, it is hard to tell which punishment frightens merchants more, heaven's judgment or women with excellent memories. The merchant grumbles, adjusts the measure, and gives an extra handful. The woman accepts it with the grave dignity of a queen receiving tribute. You spend the morning watching the economy of tired backs. Nothing here feels grand enough to appear in royal chronicles, yet the town depends on it utterly. Women sell the eggs that thicken pottage, the wool that becomes winter clothing, the herbs that comfort fever, the thread that mends sleeves, the butter that softens bread, the gossip that warns against cheats, the small credit that carries a household from one hungry week to the next. They know who is newly widowed, who has a daughter of marriageable age, who waters ale, who beats servants, who paid late, whose cow is dry, whose son ran off, and whose saint's relic cured a toothache after failing entirely with gout. The monk pauses at a stall where pilgrim badges glimmer dull pewter in a tray. Shells, crosses, tiny saints, little flasks meant to hold holy water. He picks one up, then puts it down when the seller names the price. His Holiness, it seems, has a budget. Near midday, rain begins, thin and needling. Cloths are pulled over baskets, goods are gathered inward. The rush mats smell sweet as they dampen. Your cloak darkens at the shoulders. The dog steals a dropped crust and looks spiritually renewed. You help carry a basket beneath an overhang, and the woman who owns it thanks you by telling you not to crush the eggs, which is fair. When the church bell rings again, the square is fully alive, wet, loud, and shivering. You stand amid bargaining voices and dripping eaves, feeling the ache in your shoulders from a basket you carried only a short way. Around you, women continue beneath heavier loads, sharper risks, and narrower margins. They do not float through medieval life like figures in painted glass. They haul it, price it, mend it, feed it, and argue it into lasting one more day. And as the rain threads silver through the market air, you realize the town's mourning has been carried in on women's backs before most men have finished deciding whether to wake. The rain does not stop so much as thin itself into mist, and by the time the market begins to fold inward, the square smells of wet wool, bruised leeks, fish scales, trampled rushes, and smoke drifting low from cooking fires. Women knot cloth over baskets, tuck coins into hidden purses, lift loads back onto aching shoulders, and vanish one by one into lanes silvered with rain. The woman whose eggs you helped protect gives you a heel of bread with a smear of soft cheese. Not because you have earned a feast, but because you did not break anything, which in this world is sometimes enough to be praised. You're about to follow the suspicious monk toward the Abbey Road when a girl comes running through the square. Skirts dark with mud at the hem, hair escaping from beneath her coif. She stops near the alewife, bends with both hands on her knees, and gasps out a name. The alewife's face changes only a little, but everyone nearby notices. Market women always notice the small change before the large disaster. Fetch Maud, the alewife says. A woman at the herb stall is already tying up her bundle. She is older than the others, narrow as a winter branch, with a wool cloak patched at both elbows and a leather satchel hanging from her shoulder. This, you understand, is Maud the midwife, though no one announces her as such. In towns like this, certain women do not need titles. Their names travel ahead of them through walls. The girl says the pains have come close together. Maud asks 3 questions, quick and quiet. How long has she eaten? Is her mother there? The answers do not please her, but they do not frighten her either. She gestures for the girl to lead. You should not follow. You know this. Birthrooms are women's places, guarded by custom, privacy, fear, and steam. But the alewife thrusts a wrapped bundle of clean linen into your arms and says, "Carry that, and keep your eyes useful. So you go. The dog follows, of course, until Maud points one finger at him outside the lane and says, "Not you." He sits beneath the dripping eaves with the tragic dignity of a banished lord. The cottage stands near the town wall where the houses grow smaller and the smoke smells more of peat than oak. Its door is low, its thatch dark with rain, its threshold muddy from many feet. Inside, the air is warm, close, and alive with candlelight. A little fire burns on the hearth. A pot of water hangs from an iron hook. Rushes have been swept fresh across the floor, and bunches of herbs dangle from the rafters: lavender, rue, betony, pennyroyal, and rosemary. Their scents mingling with smoke, wool, and the sour fear of waiting. A young woman lies propped in the bed, face damp, hair loose, one hand gripping the wrist of her mother. You do not stare. You look instead at the wooden bowl near the hearth, the folded cloths, the stool, the little carved image of St. Margaret set on a shelf, a beeswax candle burning beside it despite the cost. In many places, St. Margaret is called upon by women in labour, though no one can quite agree how much of her legend belongs to history, hope, or the desperate imagination of people who need someone holy to stand in a dangerous room. Maud takes the linen from you, checks it with a touch, and sets it near the fire to warm. She asks for more water. She asks for the door curtain to be pinned against the draught. She asks someone to untie every knot in the room. This puzzles you. The mother moves at once, untying a cord from a sack, loosening the drawstring of a pouch, even tugging at a knot in a hanging bundle of herbs. Some swear that knots can hinder birth, that a tied cord, a locked chest, or even braided hair might hold the body closed. Others say it is only a way to make frightened hands busy. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the untying changes fate or simply gives the room permission to breathe. Maud notices the young woman's hair still bound in one place and loosens it gently. "There," she murmurs, "nothing holding you." The words are soft, but they settle over the room like a blanket. You're told to stand near the hearth and keep the water warm. This is a task you can manage, though you manage it with the grim seriousness of a knight defending a bridge. The alewife arrives not long after, carrying a small jug, some honey, and the expression of a woman who has entered many rooms where men suddenly discover urgent business elsewhere. She glances at you beside the hearth. "Still useful?" she asks. "For the moment," Maud says. "This may be the finest review you receive all week." The hours lengthen. Outside, the rain taps the thatch. Inside, the candle before St. Margaret burns lower, its wax softening in a golden tear. The young woman moans, rests, grips, breathes, sweats, and whispers that she cannot. Her mother says she can. The alewife says she must. Maud says very little, but when she speaks, everyone obeys. You begin to understand that the room is not ruled by panic, though fear lives in every corner. It is ruled by knowledge passed hand to hand, mouth to ear, bed to bed, through women who have seen enough to move carefully in danger. Maud warms cloth. She mixes a little honeyed ale. She crushes an herb between her fingers and lets the young woman smell it. She presses here, adjusts there, listens to breath, watches colour, counts time without a clock. The monastery bells mark the day outside. But in this cottage, time is measured by pain, pause, water, flame, and the midwife's eyes. A neighbour mutters a charm under her breath. Words half prayer, half old habit. The priest may not like every word of it. The mother crosses herself anyway. Medieval faith, you see, is often layered like winter clothing. Church prayer over older custom, saint over herb, candle over charm, caution over hope. When danger sits on the bed, people use every tool within reach. At last, Maud sends you outside for more wood, and you're grateful for the cold air. The dog is still under the eaves, damp and offended. The broken-wheeled cart stands nearby in the lane, abandoned until morning, one wheel tilted like a tired moon. The town wall looms above, wet stone shining in the dusk. You gather split sticks from a covered pile, then pause as a bell rings from the church, slow, distant, almost hidden by rain. When you return, the room has changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, just changed. The women's faces are softer, though still tired. The young mother lies back against pillows, pale but present, and Maud bends over a small wrapped bundle near the fire. A thin cry rises, startling and fierce, no bigger than a thread, yet strong enough to pull every breath in the cottage toward it. No one cheers. That would be too simple. The mother weeps quietly. Her own mother presses both hands to her mouth. The alewife closes her eyes for one brief moment, then opens them and tells you to stop letting the fire sink. Life here does not arrive into comfort. It arrives into smoke, debt, cold water, reused linen, anxious prayers, and women who know how narrow the door can be between this world and the next. You feed the hearth. Maud washes her hands. The candle before the saint gutters but does not go out. Later, as night gathers outside the cottage and the rain softens to a whisper, you step back into the lane with your cloak smelling of smoke and herbs. Behind the door, women murmur around the bed. The dog rises and leans against your leg. You rest one hand on his damp head, and for a long moment, you do not feel clever enough for any joke at all. You only feel the smallness of yourself beside what you have witnessed, not spectacle, not legend, but skill, endurance, fear, tenderness, and the fierce, ordinary miracle of women keeping the world populated by candlelight. You sleep that night not in the cottage, where the women keep their soft watch around mother and child, but in a shed beside the lane, with the dog curled against your knees and the smell of damp hay rising all around you. The alewife has found you the place. Though found may be too generous a word for pointing at a roof and saying it leaks less than the sky, still the hay holds a little warmth, and your cloak, smoky from the birthroom, keeps the worst of the cold from your bones. Before dawn, frost silvers the town. You wake to the monastery bell, faint beyond the walls, ringing through the dark as if the air itself has turned to metal. For a moment you do not know where you are. Then the dog sighs. The broken cartwheel creaks in the lane outside, and memory returns in slow pieces the gate, the alehouse, the manor hall, the market, the candle before St. Margaret, the newborn cry thin as thread. The shed door opens, and the woman with the red thread on her basket looks in. "If you're coming to the fields, come now," she says. "Frost doesn't wait for soft people. This seems unfair, since Frost has waited patiently all night for the chance to attack you personally." You step into a world pale and brittle. The roofs are white. The ruts in the lane are hard as fired clay. Your breath drifts before you. The dog trots ahead, pleased by the cold for reasons only dogs and possibly saints understand, beyond the town gate, where the gatekeeper's wife stands with keys at her belt and sleep nowhere in her eyes. A small group of women gathers beside the road tenant wives, daughters, widows, servants sent from the manor, each carrying tools, baskets, cords, and cloths wrapped around their hands. The gatekeeper's wife lets you pass with them, though she tells one woman to mind the lower meadow because the reeve has been counting gleanings like a hungry crow. Some swear a crow at dawn can warn of a greedy official. Others say greedy officials need no bird to announce them. No one can quite agree, but everyone glances at the black shapes hopping in the hedge. The fields lie under frost, wide and quiet, with bare hedgerows stitched along their edges and the manor roofs dim behind you. You walk over ridged earth that catches at your boots. The women move with purpose towards strips of land where winter work waits, because medieval fields do not become merciful simply because the air hurts your face. There is firewood to gather, dead stalks to pull, dung to spread, animals to check, flax to sort, and gleaned grain to guard as if each kernel were a coin. One woman, whose name is Avis, carries a sickle at her belt and a bundle of cords over her shoulder. She explains that after harvest, the poor may glean what remains in the field, but only by custom, and only so long as those above them remember custom kindly. A widow beside her laughs without much warmth. Kindly, she says, as if tasting a bad apple. You help gather scattered stalks near the edge of a field, bending until your back complains like an old door. The women bend faster. They do not speak much at first. Their hands move through frost-stiff straw, picking, shaking, tying, sorting. Their skirts brush the ground and darken at the hem. Their fingers redden. One woman wraps strips of old linen tighter around her knuckles, then keeps working. You last perhaps half an hour before your hands begin to feel less like hands, and more like decorative pastry left too long in a cold pantry. Avis notices. Soft, she says. You cannot argue. The evidence is attached to your wrists. The widow shows you how to tuck your thumbs inside the cloth when the wind rises, how to carry the basket against your hip instead of letting it drag your shoulder, how to keep moving before cold settles into your joints. She does not do this sweetly. She does it efficiently, as one might adjust a badly packed mule. Near midday, you return with them to a low byre where cattle steam in the dimness and hens mutter beneath a wattle fence. A girl scatters grain. Another woman checks a cow's udder and frowns. Milk is thin in winter. Butter is precious. Cheese keeps better. Every spoonful has already been counted in someone's head before it reaches a bowl. In a corner of the byre hangs a little horseshoe, nailed open end upward above the door. Some swear it catches luck. Others insist it keeps witches from souring milk or slipping in to ride the animals at night. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the horseshoe guards the beasts, comforts the household, or merely proves that iron has always looked reassuring when nailed above a threshold. The women touch it as they pass, not dramatically, just quickly, as if greeting an old guard. From the byre they go to brewing. You follow into a yard behind a cottage, where a great wooden tub stands under a lean-to, and malted grain waits in sacks. The work is cold, wet, heavy, and exact. Water must be heated, grain steeped, mash stirred, liquid drawn off, herbs added, vessels cleaned. The alewife's smoky kingdom suddenly seems less like a tavern and more like the visible tip of a mountain built from women's arms. Bad ale can sicken a household, ruin a reputation, or waste grain no one can spare. Good ale warms bellies, pays debts, welcomes guests, and makes the water less suspicious. A young wife drops a sprig of rosemary into the tub and mutters that it keeps envy away. The widow says envy has never feared rosemary. Avis says perhaps not, but it improves the smell of envy considerably. That is the first true laugh of the day, quiet and brief, rising like steam in the cold yard. After brewing comes mending. After mending comes hauling water. After hauling water comes feeding pigs that shove their snouts into troughs with the manners of minor nobility. After that, a child's torn sleeve, a cracked bowl to be set aside for glue, a bundle of kindling to split, and a strip of bacon to hang higher from a cat with ambition. The work does not unfold in grand chapters. It piles, overlaps, interrupts itself, and returns with friends. You eat with them near a small fire at the field edge coarse bread, a slice of hard cheese, onions roasted in ash, and pottage carried in a lidded pot wrapped with cloth. Smoke stings your eyes. Frost melts under your boots and becomes mud again, proving that the road has many costumes and all of them are inconvenient. Avis tells you of a woman from the next village who once walked 3 miles with a sack of grain, gave birth before Vespers, and argued rent at Manor Court the following morning. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether the rent was reduced, whether the baby was born before or after the bell, or whether the reeve fainted. Everyone agrees the woman won the argument. As afternoon lowers, you cross the fields again, carrying a basket that seems to grow heavier with every step. The women carry more. They always carry more. They carry food, water, wood, children, gossip, illness, memory, fear, household accounts, and the private knowledge of which cupboard is nearly empty. They carry winter itself, piece by piece, until spring can be persuaded back over the hills. By the time you return toward the town, your shoulders ache, your fingers sting, and your boots are rimmed with thawing mud. The dog looks at you with cheerful disappointment, as if he expected better from your species. Ahead, the evening bell begins to sound, soft through the cold air. You think of the washerwoman's red hands, the alewife's chalk marks, the lady's keys, Maud's candlelit skill. Now you add the field women frost-bent, basket-laden, sharp-eyed, laughing only when the work allows it. You understand a little more, and the understanding is heavy in the best way, like a wool blanket drawn over cold feet. You could not handle them, not because they are cruel or strange or carved from legend, but because they endure a world that asks too much before breakfast and keeps asking after dark. And still they walk home under the fading sky, counting what remains, planning what must be done, and saving one candle stub for later. The next morning carries you back toward the manor, not along the open field path this time, but by a lane pressed between hedges where frost clings to thorn and last year's leaves rattle like tiny bones. The dog ranges ahead, stopping now and then to investigate every smell the medieval world has generously left at ankle height. Your shoulders still ache from yesterday's basket, and your fingers remember the cold with a private bitterness. The women, unfortunately, do not appear impressed by your suffering. They have already suffered more before sunrise and still remembered to bring onions. Avis walks beside you with a folded cloth tucked beneath one arm. The widow from the fields, whose name you learn is Elswith, carries a small wooden box and wears a dark wool cloak pinned with a plain iron brooch. Her face is weathered, not weak. Her mouth has the firm line of someone who has argued with hunger, men, weather, and hens, and found all four unreliable. Today is Manor Court. The hall looks different by daylight, less smoky mystery, more practical damp. Rushes lie thick across the floor, though near the doorway they are already tracked with mud. A long table has been set near the high end, where the steward sits with wax tablets, a roll of parchment, and the grave expression of a man preparing to make other people miserable by procedure. The lady of the manor is present too, seated slightly back, keys at her belt, eyes alert beneath her veil. Her husband is still absent, which changes less than songs would have you believe. Villagers gather along the walls, tenants, labourers, smallholders, a miller with flour on his sleeve, two brothers glaring at each other over a boundary ditch, and three women with baskets at their feet. Chickens are not officially attending, though one has entered beneath a bench and appears ready to offer testimony. The suspicious monk stands near the door, claiming he has come to witness an agreement concerning Abbey land. He also accepts warm ale from a servant. His devotion remains flexible. Manor Court is not grand law with trumpets and scarlet robes. It is local memory made uncomfortable. It deals with rents, fences, stray animals, unpaid work, brewing fines, inheritance, marriage permissions, small debts, and the thousand little frictions that keep village life from either functioning or exploding. The steward calls names. People step forward. Someone owes 2 hens. Someone cut wood where he should not. Someone's pig broke into winter peas, and the pig, being absent, cannot defend itself. Then Elswith's name is called. She steps forward with her wooden box. You expect uncertainty, perhaps fear. Instead, she opens the box and removes folded cloth, a tally stick, and a small scrap of parchment wrapped in linen. The steward's brows shift. He had perhaps expected grief to be less organised. Her husband, you learn, died after Michaelmas. No one can quite agree whether it was fever from the marsh, bad air near the ditch, or the old chill that takes men who insist on working wet and sleeping colder. Some swear a raven sat on their roof 3 mornings before he took to bed. Others say ravens sit where they like and should not be given the dignity of legal evidence. Either way, Elswith is now a widow, and the question is what land, beasts, tools, and debts remain properly hers. The steward begins with custom. The word falls heavily. Custom here is a door that can either open or bruise your shoulder. A widow may have rights to a portion of land, to dower, to goods she brought into marriage, to the use of a cottage, depending on place, memory, witnesses, and whether the powerful find it convenient to remember mercy. Elswyth stands straight and names the strips of land. She names the acre near the lower meadow, the half strip by the thorn hedge, the kitchen garden behind the cottage, the 2 hens owed from her sister's marriage portion, and the brown cow that her husband's cousin has apparently begun describing as shared. The cousin, a round-faced man with a beard full of confidence, protests. He says the cow was lent. Elswyth says the cow was never lent, unless eating her hay for 3 winters counts as a loan. The hall murmurs. The steward asks for witnesses. Elswyth turns. Avis steps forward. So does the washerwoman from the town gate, red hands tucked into her sleeves. So does a bent old man who remembers the wedding because, he says, the ale was thin and the groom's uncle fell into the ditch. This detail, though not strictly legal, seems to strengthen his credibility. No one invents thin ale without cause. The lady of the manor watches quietly. Her fingers rest near her keys. Elswyth produces the tally stick. It is notched along one edge, split lengthwise long ago, one half kept by her household, the other by the man who owed payment. The steward fits the halves together, and the notches match. There is something deeply satisfying about it, like a small wooden truth snapping back into place. In a world where few can read, Wood remembers what mouths may later deny. The cousin shifts. The chicken under the bench clucks once, possibly in judgment. Next comes the matter of reputation. A neighbour has whispered that Elswyth brewed weak ale after her husband died, or sold short measure, or allowed men to come too late to her door. The accusation hangs there, vague but poisonous. You feel the room tighten. A woman alone must guard not only goods and land, but the story told about her after dark. The alewife, who has entered so quietly you did not notice, speaks from near the hearth. She says she tasted Elswyth's ale and found it honest enough. She adds that weak ale has many sins, but grief is not one of them. A few people lower their eyes. The steward makes a mark. Some swear that a widow should place iron beneath her threshold for 3 nights after a husband's burial, to keep wandering spirits and greedy relatives from entering. Others say iron will not stop a cousin with an excuse. Even now, it is hard to tell whether charms protect a widow, or whether witnesses, tallies, and a voice that does not tremble serve her better. The court moves slowly. A debt here, a hen there, a small fine forgiven, another confirmed. Elswyth loses one argument about a broken fence but wins the cow, the garden, the hens, and the right to remain in her cottage through winter. It is not triumph as a bard would understand it. No sword shines, no castle falls, but when the steward speaks the decision, her shoulders lower by the width of a breath. That breath matters. Afterward, outside in the yard, rain begins again, soft as wool being carded. Elswyth puts the tally stick back in her box. The cousin avoids her eyes. The dog noses hopefully at her basket, and she gives him nothing, which he accepts as a complex legal outcome. You stand beneath the eaves with Avis while villagers disperse into the wet lanes. The lady of the manor passes by and pauses beside Elswyth, speaking so quietly you cannot hear the words. Elswyth bows her head, not submissively, but in acknowledgement. 2 women, differently ranked, both knowing that keys and custom can save or ruin a life. As you walk back toward the road, the monastery bell rings through the rain. You think of law not as a great clear river, but as a muddy track full of ruts, stones, and hidden holes. Medieval women are often trapped on that road. Yes, yet some learn every rut by heart. They bring witnesses. They save tallies. They remember which hen was promised, which cow was theirs, which man lies badly, and which lady is listening. And you, with your sore hands and borrowed straw in your sleeve, begin to understand that survival here is not only strength. Sometimes it is memory sharpened into a tool and carried in a widow's wooden box. The rain follows you from the manor yard in thin grey threads, needling the hedges, darkening the road, and turning every old rut into a little trap with ambitions. By the time you reach the edge of the village, your cloak smells again of wet wool, your boots have accepted mud as a permanent condition, and the dog has collected enough damp straw in his fur to resemble a small moving mattress. Avis leads you not back toward the fields, but to a long, low cottage near the stream, where smoke leaks from a hole in the thatch and the sound of women's voices hums within. It is not singing at first, not exactly. More like murmuring shaped by rhythm, a rise, a fall, a repeated line, then laughter tucked quickly under the work. The door opens before you knock, because someone inside has already heard your steps, judged your weight, and decided you're not interesting enough to fear. Warmth folds around you, not clean warmth, never that, but hearth warmth, smoke, damp wool, lanolin, onions, old rushes, and the sharp animal smell of fleece waiting to be made useful. Women sit in a half-circle near the fire, spinning, carding, sewing, winding thread, sorting scraps, and mending garments whose lives have been extended past all reasonable expectation. The room is crowded with baskets, wool hangs from pegs, a distaff leans against the wall, a spindle turns in one woman's fingers. Dropping and twisting with such smoothness that it seems less a tool than a quiet thought made visible. You're given a stool that wobbles only when you breathe. Sit careful, one woman says. It threw a priest last Lent. No one can quite agree whether the stool truly threw him, or whether the priest had taken too much ale before blessing the spring lambs. Either way, the stool remains suspected and you treat it with respect. The women laugh softly, but their hands do not stop. That is the first thing you notice, nothing stops. A joke passes, thread continues. A cough rises, needle continues. A child whimpers in a cradle near the wall. One foot rocks it while both hands keep carding wool. The day does not pause for feeling. Feeling must learn to sit beside labour and behave. Avis settles near the hearth and takes up a spindle. Elswith, the widow from court, opens her wooden box again, but this time it holds not tallies and claims, but needles, pins, a twist of thread, and a scrap of cloth with a seam half repaired. The washerwoman is here too, her red hands wrapped around a mug for one brief moment before she reaches for a torn shirt. Even the alewife appears after a while, carrying a bundle of linen and pretending she has only come to borrow thread, though everyone knows she has come to hear what was said after Manor Court. The cottage becomes a small parliament of wool. You watch fingers draw fibres into thread, thread into yarn, yarn into cloth, cloth into shirts, hoods, blankets, hose, swaddling bands, shrouds. Nothing in this world is simple once you see who makes it. A sleeve is weather, sheep, pasture, shears, washing, carding, spinning, weaving, cutting, stitching, mending, and mending again. A blanket is not a blanket. It is months of hands refusing to let winter win. One woman uses a bone needle polished smooth from years of work. Another keeps pins in a little cushion stuffed with wool and lavender. Pins are precious things, small enough to vanish, sharp enough to matter, and expensive enough that losing one can sour an afternoon. Some swear that dropping a needle point first means a visitor is coming. Others say it means you should look where you're putting your feet, even now. It is hard to tell whether such signs predict the future, or simply keep tired women alert around sharp objects. The singing returns, low and even. The words seem harmless at first, something about a maid by a mill stream and a goose that will not come home. But the women smile in odd places. A husband in the song loses his boots. A reeve miscounts his hens. A lord steward falls into a ditch after trusting his own wisdom too deeply. No name is spoken. No accusation is made. Yet everyone knows which steward once tried to charge a fee for shadows in the market. And the line about the ditch receives careful attention. This, you realise, is complaint stitched into melody. Quiet rebellion does not always shout. Sometimes it hums while darning socks. A young seamstress named Cecily works on a green sleeve meant for the manor. She's quick, neat, and pale from indoor labour. Her fingertips are pricked in tiny dark points. She tells you that some girls keep the first thread they spin on New Year's Day tied around the wrist for luck in work and love. Avis says love is less dependable than a good spindle. The alewife says both can leave you dizzy if badly handled. The washerwoman says nothing, but her mouth bends as she knots thread. Near the hearth, Elswith patches a child's tunic with cloth cut from her dead husband's old shirt. She does it calmly, though the room grows quieter around her. Cloth holds memory here. A sleeve remembers a shoulder. A hem remembers mud from a road walked years ago. A wedding shift becomes a child's wrap, then a cleaning rag, then tinder. Nothing leaves all at once. It is used down slowly, as if the household cannot bear to waste even grief. The suspicious monk appears at the doorway before none, shaking rain from his cloak. He asks whether any linen is ready for the abbey guest house. The women answer with several versions of almost, each shaped differently. He steps inside and sees a strip of embroidery lying near Cecily's basket. Tiny leaves worked in green, a little bird in red thread, a curling vine that looks nearly alive in the firelight. He says decoration may tempt vanity. Cecily says the abbey altar cloth has gold thread enough to tempt a dragon. The room goes still for half a breath. Then the alewife coughs into her mug. The monk's ears redden. He says nothing more about vanity. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether women's embroidery hides meanings deliberately or whether later eyes imagine secrets in every bird and vine. Still, as you look at the curling thread, you wonder. A blue flower near a cuff, a crooked leaf on a veil, a red stitch inside a hem where only the wearer knows it rests. In a world where women's words are often weighed, corrected, or dismissed, perhaps cloth becomes a place where memory can live without asking permission. Rain ticks softly against the roof. The cradle creaks. The dog sleeps under the table, twitching in dreams, perhaps chasing a legally disputed chicken. The half-burned candle saved from the manor has been set near the work, its small flame guarded by a shield of the horn. Around it, the women lean close, their faces lit from below, eyes tired, hands tireless. You try carding wool and make a mess of it almost immediately. The fibres snarl. The carding comb catches your sleeve. Avis takes the tool from you with the patient disappointment of a master watching a duck attempt bookkeeping. She shows you again pull, lift, smooth, turn. The rhythm matters. Force ruins the fibre. Too little pressure does nothing. Like so many things here, it must be handled with firmness and care. By late afternoon, the room smells warmer, woollier, more human. Finished thread winds around spindles. Mended garments pile in baskets. A strip of new cloth is folded and tied. The work remains endless, but a small portion of it has been defeated. When you step outside again, the rain has stopped. The village lies damp and quiet beneath the low sky. From far off, the monastery bell sounds, and somewhere nearer, the broken cartwheel gives one tired creak in the lane. You carry with you the sound of the women's song, its harmless goose, its foolish steward, its hidden teeth. You understand now that thread is not soft because life is soft. Thread is soft because hands have forced rough fleece into order, twist by twist, hour by hour. And in those twists, women keep warmth, wages, memory, mockery, mourning, beauty, and the smallest rebellions close enough to touch. The road to the monastery rises gently beyond the village, past hedges beaded with rain, and fields where the last frost hides in the shade of stones. You walk with the suspicious monk ahead of you, his cloak gathered high to avoid the mud, though the mud has clearly declared war on him personally. The dog follows at your heel, carrying in his fur a selection of straw, burrs, and possibly one small twig from yesterday's wool cottage, as if he too has begun collecting relics of the journey. The monastery appears by degrees, first the sound of bells, then the pale line of a wall, then the pointed roof of the church rising above leafless trees. Smoke lifts from the kitchen house. Crows stand along the wall like badly behaved scribes. The bell rings, none, or near enough, and the monk glances upward with the solemn irritation of a man who suspects the bell ringer is either early, late, or spiritually imprecise. At the gatehouse, a lay brother opens a small wicket and peers out. The suspicious monk gives his name. You are admitted into a yard paved with uneven stones, slick from rain, where novices carry baskets. A servant leads a mule, and a woman in a dark cloak waits with a bundle of linen for the infirmary. The air smells different here, less market fish, more damp stone, beeswax, cabbage soup, ink, and old wood polished by sleeves. You're taken to the guest house, a long, chilly building with narrow windows and rushes spread over the floor. The rushes here are cleaner than in the alehouse, though this may only mean they've had fewer opportunities for adventure. A small fire burns near one wall. Pilgrims sit close to it, drying hems, comparing sore feet, and guarding their little badges as if pewter shells can argue with rain. One old woman insists her badge touched a saint's shrine and cured her niece's toothache. Another says toothaches often leave when they are tired of being complained about. No one can quite agree whether the shrine worked, but everyone agrees the niece stopped crying, which is the sort of miracle households appreciate most. The monk tells you the abbey has a small matter needing help. A packet of copied pages must be carried to the women's house beyond the inner garden, where the nuns keep accounts, prayers, and a school for girls of families respectable enough to pay. He says this carefully, as if women reading Latin might be a candle set too near dry straw. You carry the packet because you are warm from walking and still foolish enough to be useful. A lay sister meets you near a covered passage. She wears a plain dark habit, a white veil, and a belt from which hang keys, a knife, and a little pouch for wax tablets. Her face is calm but not soft. It has the same alertness you saw in the gatekeeper's wife, the alewife, the lady, Maud, Elswith, Avis, and all the others, the look of someone who knows where everything is kept and who will notice if it moves. She leads you to a parlour divided by a wooden grille. Beyond it, in a room warmer than the passage, several nuns sit at work. One copies from a book, lips moving slightly as her quill scratches over parchment. Another counts coins beside a wax tablet. A third teaches two girls to shape letters with careful strokes, correcting their hands with the patience of rain wearing down stone. Shelves hold books wrapped in leather, bundles of documents, a box of seals, a small painted image of the Virgin, and a reliquary shaped like a silver hand. The silver hand draws your eye. The lay sister notices. St. Euphemia's finger bone, she says. The suspicious monk, who has followed just far enough to be nosy, coughs. Some swear the relic healed a nun's fever 40 years ago. Others whisper that the bone came from a sheep, a soldier, or a merchant with excellent imagination. Even now, it is hard to tell whether holiness rests in the object, the prayer, or the desperate hope gathered around it. Still, the little silver hand gleams softly in the candlelight, and no one in the room treats it lightly. A nun behind the grille looks up from her writing. She is older than you first think, with fine lines around her eyes and ink on the side of her finger. Her name is Sister Agnes. She receives the packet, breaks the thread, and examines the pages. Her gaze moves quickly. The suspicious monk says the scribe at the abbey copied them faithfully. Sister Agnes says she hopes so, because last time he confused a rent of 2 hens with 2 geese. And geese are not a small theological matter when winter accounts are due. The monk reddens. The girls hide smiles over their tablets. Here, behind the grille, you expected silence. Instead, you find order disciplined, enclosed, but alive with work. The bell rules the day matins in darkness, lauds before sunrise, prime, terce, sext, nun, vespers, compline yet between prayers the women read, write, teach, stitch vestments, tend herbs, manage rents, brew medicines, receive letters, and preserve names that might otherwise fall through cracks in memory. Their enclosure is real. The walls are real. The grill is real. But so is the authority that gathers around books, keys, accounts, and prayer. Sister Agnes asks whether you came through the market. You say yes. She asks whether the alewife's malt looked sound. You say it seemed so, though you admit you're no judge. She smiles faintly. Few men are, she says, and scratches a note on wax. You stand near the parlour fire, holding your damp hands toward the warmth. On the wall hangs a little bundle of dried sage and rue, meant to cleanse the air during sickness. A novice tells you they burn juniper when fever visits. Another says the smoke drives away corruption. A third whispers that it drives away fleas only if the fleas are devout enough to leave. The older nun gives her a look, but not a harsh one. From a nearby room comes the steady rhythm of chant, low and even, voices braided like thread. The sound settles into the stone, into your cloak, into the tired place behind your eyes. You think of the spinning cottage, of songs hiding jokes and grief. Here the songs hide discipline, longing, memory, perhaps even escape. Some girls are sent here willingly, some not. Some women find learning behind these walls. Some find loneliness. Some swear a convent is a cage. Others swear it is the only door that ever opened. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, because women's freedom in this world is not one thing. It changes shape with wealth, birth, widowhood, talent, stubbornness, and the keys a woman is permitted to hold. Before you leave, Sister Agnes gives you a scrap of parchment with a copied prayer for safe roads. The ink is still slightly glossy. She also tells you not to trust the bridge after heavy rain, not to buy fish from the red-bearded man near the east gate, and not to let the dog sleep too close to the guest-house kitchen, because Brother Martin overfeeds strays and then complains of signs from heaven. The dog, hearing no Latin but understanding opportunity, wags his tail. As evening draws near, the bells begin again, slow and deep. You return to the guest house with the prayer tucked inside your cloak, the smell of ink clinging to your fingers, and the image of Sister Agnes behind the grill bright in your mind enclosed. Yes, watched. Yes, limited in ways heavy as stone, yet also reading, counting, teaching, correcting monks, guarding relics no one fully trusts, and holding a world of words in her ink-stained hands. You lie that night on a narrow pallet beneath a wool blanket, listening to pilgrims breathe, bells fade, and rain begins softly on the roof. Somewhere beyond the wall, the nuns chant Compline into the dark, and the sound feels less like an ending than a lamp being covered gently, not extinguished, only kept safe until morning. At first light, the monastery yard is blue with cold, and the stones shine where rain has polished them through the night. You wake beneath your wool blanket to the slow tolling of prime, the sound coming down through the guesthouse roof as if the bell has been hung inside your skull. Around you, pilgrims stir in stages, a cough, a groan, the rustle of damp cloaks, the careful search for shoes that have spent the night becoming colder out of spite. The dog rises before you do, stretches luxuriously, and shakes straw over a sleeping man who mutters something that is probably not a prayer. The suspicious monk passes through the guest house with a candle stub and a face full of duties. He tells the pilgrims that the eastern road is passable, though the bridge by the willow bend may be sulking after the rain. Sister Agnes's warning returns to you, tucked beside the copied prayer under your cloak. You touch the parchment once before standing. The ink is dry now, faintly rough beneath your fingers. A group of women gathers near the gatehouse, adjusting packs and tying cloth around blistered feet. There is Avis, who has come to visit a shrine for her sister's sick child. There is Elswith, the widow, carrying her wooden box wrapped in linen and tied close against her body. There is the woman with the blue bead from the alehouse, and a fishwife from the market whose voice could probably frighten tax collectors from a distance. Two others wear pilgrim badges pinned to their cloaks. Little pewter shells, a stamped saint, a tiny flask meant for holy water. They glimmer dully in the morning light, small promises made of cheap metal and enormous hope. You fall into step with them because the road is safer in company, and because by now you've learned that women in motion usually know where food, shelter, gossip, danger, and dry kindling may be found. This is more useful than any map you have ever seen, including the sort monks draw with Jerusalem politely centred, and everything else arranged by confidence. The monastery gate closes behind you. Ahead, the pilgrim road winds through winter fields, low woodland, and strips of mist lying in the hollows. Mud takes your boots at once. It is not dramatic mud, not battle mud, not saga mud. It is the everyday sucking, clinging, intimate mud of people who must go on with errands anyway. The women walk with staffs, baskets, bundles, and a patience that feels almost rude. The first hour is quiet except for bells fading behind you, crows in the hedges, and the steady wet rhythm of feet. Then the fishwife begins telling a tale about a woman who walked barefoot to a shrine and returned with her husband cured of a fever, though no one can quite agree whether the cure came from the saint, the walking, the herbs taken along the way, or the husband's fear of hearing the story repeated forever. Either way, he lived, and she never let him forget the price of his recovery. Avis carries a strip of linen tied around her wrist, one that belonged to the sick child. At the shrine, she means to touch it to the saint's reliquary and bring it home. Some swear cloth can carry blessing the way wool carries smoke. Others say it carries comfort, and comfort is not nothing when a child burns with fever in a dark room. Even now, it is hard to tell whether such things heal the body, steady the heart, or simply keep despair from sitting too close. Near midday, you reach the Willow Bridge. It crosses a narrow stream swollen by rain, its boards slick, its rail leaning as if tired of responsibility. The women stop. The dog trots onto it, turns back, and looks at you with cheerful betrayal, as though recommending caution while offering no assistance. Elswith tests the first board with her staff. It groans. The fishwife says she's heard worse sounds from husbands and survived. One by one, the women cross, skirts lifted just enough to spare the worst of the mud, feet careful, bundles balanced. You cross after them and nearly lose one boot in a gap between planks. Avis grabs your sleeve before you wobble into the stream, and the fishwife says softly that pilgrimage is not improved by drowning before lunch. Medieval encouragement often arrives dressed as insult, but it warms you anyway. Beyond the bridge, the road climbs into a thin wood of oak, ash, and hazel. Wet leaves lie black underfoot. Someone has tied little scraps of cloth to a thorn bush near a roadside shrine, strips of linen, faded ribbons, a child's thread bracelet, a bit of red wool. In a niche beneath a small wooden roof stands a weathered image of a saint whose face has been softened by rain until the expression is impossible to read. A pewter badge hangs from one nail, a clay cup sits below. Catching drips from the roof, the women pause. Some cross themselves. One leaves a pin. Avis touches the linen on her wrist to the shrine and whispers a name. Elswith stands silent, her wooden box held close. The blue bead woman pours a little water from her flask into the clay cup. No priest watches, no choir sings. The road itself seems to hold its breath. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether roadside shrines are places of power, memory, habit, or simply mercy for tired feet. But you feel the pull of it all the same, the desire to leave something small beside the road and believe someone larger has noticed. You eat under the trees when the rain begins again, bread, smoked fish, hard cheese, a few onions, and a handful of dried peas that the dog considers an insult to the entire concept of food. The women remove shoes and inspect their feet. Blisters bloom like pale moons. One rubs them with goose grease from a little horn pot. Another ties wool around her toes. Avis carries a charm against foot pain, a tiny written verse folded in waxed cloth. given by a woman who swears it works if you do not unfold it, read it, wet it, lose it, mock it, or ask too many questions. This seems like a demanding charm, but then again, feet are demanding things. The afternoon road is slower. The women talk more as weariness lowers their guard. The blue bead woman has made her vow because her brother vanished on a trade road 2 winters ago, and she dreams of him standing by water. The fishwife travels not for sickness but gratitude, because a boat returned in fog when everyone expected it lost. Elswyth says only that she wishes to give thanks for keeping her cottage through winter. She does not mention the cow, though the dog may remember. You listen as their voices braid with the road vows, debts, births, fevers, lost brothers, saved boats, land won by tally stick, children coughing behind screens, husbands buried, daughters promised, saints bargained with in whispers. Pilgrimage, you realize, is not a holiday. It is sore feet carrying private trouble through public mud. By late day, the shrine town appears ahead as a cluster of roofs around a small church, smoke rising in pale threads. The place is famous enough to have an inn, a relic, 3 sellers of badges, and at least 5 opinions about whether the relic is genuine. Some swear the saint's tooth has cured blindness, fever, and one very stubborn cow. Others whisper that the tooth is too large for any human saint, and may have belonged to a horse with an excellent posthumous career. No one can quite agree. But pilgrims still come, because hope does not always inspect paperwork. You enter the little town beneath dripping eaves and the smell of hot pottage. A bell rings. Vespers. Women tighten cloaks, gather bundles, and step toward the church porch, weary but upright. Their feet are blistered. Their skirts are mudded. Their badges shine faintly. You follow with your own legs aching, the dog at your heel, Sister Agnes's prayer against your chest, and the strange feeling that each mile has worn away a little more of your certainty. You could not handle medieval women, you think, because even their prayers have weight. They carry them over bridges, through rain, past doubtful relics and untrustworthy roads, with sore feet and steady hands, until the evening bell receives them like smoke into rafters. The church porch is already crowded when you reach it, a low stone mouth full of damp cloaks, aching feet, whispered prayers, and the smell of wet wool warming slowly around bodies. The shrine town is smaller than its reputation, which is often the way of holy places. A narrow street curves around the churchyard, where puddles hold the last grey of evening, and beyond the roofs a hall rises behind a timber gate, its windows pricked with candlelight. Somewhere inside, someone has enough firewood to be generous, enough meat to scent the air, and enough rank to make everyone behave as if supper itself has rules. The women with whom you have walked stand beneath the porch, untying packs, straightening veils, pressing fingers to pilgrim badges. Avis touches the strip of linen at her wrist. Elswyth holds her wooden box close. The fishwife sniffs the air and says the hall is roasting pork, unless heaven has become unusually practical. The dog sneezes, perhaps in agreement. A servant in a livery coat appears from the street and calls for pilgrims who carry letters from the abbey or manor. The suspicious monk, who has somehow arrived ahead of you despite walking as if mud were beneath his dignity, points at the packet Sister Agnes gave you, then at the hall. You're drawn along with him toward warmth, rank, and the strange danger of noble hospitality. Inside, the feast hall glows like a painted page come alive. Rushes lie fresh across the floor, scattered with sweet herbs that release scent beneath passing feet lavender, rosemary, and something sharp that may be rue. The rafters are dark, but the tables shine with candlelight. Beeswax burns near the high table, while tallow smokes lower down, reminding everyone that even light knows its place. Tapestries hang against the walls, softening the cold stone with faded hunting scenes, saints, towers, and ladies who look far cleaner than anyone has a right to be in this weather. You're seated far from the high table, which is sensible, since your boots look as if they have personally offended several counties. Yet from where you sit, You can see everything important if you keep your eyes lowered enough to appear harmless. The noblewoman who rules this hall is not the lady from the manor, though she has the same key-bearing stillness. She wears a gown of dark red wool, fur at her sleeves, a veil pinned with pearls, and a girdle from which hang a small purse, a knife, and a ring of keys fine enough to suggest locked spices. Beside her sits a young woman, perhaps her daughter or niece, wearing blue wool and an expression trained to reveal almost nothing. Across from them are two visiting men and one older woman with a face smooth as carved wood. No one can quite agree whether noble feasts are more about food, friendship, politics, or the careful public chewing of resentment. Some swear alliances are made over roast meat. Others say they are made in the pauses between cups, when women glance once, look away, and decide the future of a dowry before the men notice the mustard. The meal begins with hand-washing. A servant pours warm scented water over the hands of those at the high table, catching it in a basin. Lower down, the water is cooler and less scented, but still welcome. You wipe your fingers on a cloth and try not to seem amazed by cleanliness arriving as ceremony. Bread trenchers are laid out, thick slices ready to hold meat, gravy, and status. Salt sits near the high table in a covered cellar. To sit above the salt is to matter. To sit below it is to chew with humility. You chew with humility. The first dish is pottage rich with leeks and barley, followed by smoked fish, roasted pork, coarse bread, soft cheese, and a sauce sharp with vinegar and herbs. At the high table, there are spices too, pepper, cinnamon, perhaps cloves, carried across seas and roads so long and costly that a pinch of them feels like gossip from the edge of the world. The noblewoman watches who receives what portion. She notices when one guest is served late, when another drinks too quickly, when her young kinswoman forgets to lower her eyes after a question about marriage lands like a knife wrapped in silk. The older visiting woman speaks sweetly of the girl's future, too sweetly. You have heard enough market bargaining to recognize a price being tested. The noblewoman answers with equal sweetness, praising the visiting family's lands, their chapel, their horses, and their late payment on a certain promised wool shipment, though she says this last part as gently as if describing the weather. The visiting man coughs into his cup. The young woman in blue remains still, but her fingers tighten once on the edge of her trencher. Some swear a woman should never drop her knife at table, for it means a quarrel is coming. Others say quarrels are usually already present, and the knife merely wishes to leave early. Even now, it is hard to tell whether table omens predict danger or give people a way to pretend they did not see it forming. When a servant drops a spoon near the hearth, half the hall looks up anyway. You begin to understand that this feast is not rest, it is labour in better sleeves. The noblewoman manages seating, portions, servants, tempers, messages, glances, and the fragile honour of everyone present. One wrong placement at table can become an insult. One careless toast can grow teeth. One girl's blush may be read as consent, refusal, pride, shame, or bad lighting, depending on who benefits. The suspicious monk sits near a clerk and eats with the solemn focus of a man who believes God wants him well fed. He murmurs that the shrine's relic may draw important patrons tomorrow. The clerk whispers that the relic tooth has been inspected twice and praised once, which does not answer much. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether the saint's tooth is holy, horseborn, or simply useful for attracting donations. Yet the noblewoman has already arranged candles for it, lodging for guests, and a gift of cloth to be seen by the right eyes at the right time. Later, music begins softly, a harp, a small pipe, a voice singing of spring though winter presses hard at the shutters. Servants move like shadows. The dog waits beneath your bench, accepting scraps from a boy who has not yet learned discretion. Across the hall, the young woman in blue rises to offer a cup to the older guest. Her hands are steady, her smile is small. When the guest says something you cannot hear, the girl answers, and the noblewoman's eyes flicker with approval. There it is again, survival as performance. Not falsehood exactly, but discipline. A woman at such a table must know when to speak, when to lower her gaze, when to remember a debt, when to hide disgust, when to laugh at a poor joke, and when to let silence do the cutting, you, who nearly lost a boot on a pilgrim bridge, would last perhaps 10 minutes before offending a cousin, misplacing the salt, and accidentally promising 3 acres to someone's nephew. The hall grows warmer, candles shorten, the pork bones are cleared, trenchers soaked with juices are gathered for the poor or the dogs, depending on custom, charity, and who is watching. Outside, rain taps the shutters. Inside, the noblewoman still sits straight, fur-lined sleeves resting lightly on the table, while every alliance, insult, dowry, appetite, and rumour circles her like smoke around a beam. When at last you are shown to a sleeping place near the lower end of the hall, you lie beneath a wool blanket and listen to quiet footsteps making the final rounds. Keys click, a door closes. The uncertain relic waits in the church. The pilgrim badges dry by the hearth. The dog sighs against your leg. And somewhere near the high table, behind curtains and candle ends, women continue speaking softly, weaving tomorrow before the men have finished digesting tonight. By morning, the feast hall has lost its glow and returned to the honest greyness of a room where people have slept too close together under wool blankets that remember every damp cloak laid upon them. The beeswax candles at the high table have burned down into golden stubs, carefully saved. The tallow lights below have left their heavier smell in the rafters. Rushes are flattened where servants passed through the night. And somewhere near the hearth the dog is finishing a dream with soft kicks of his paws, perhaps pursuing a roast pork bone across a meadow where no one charges market tolls. You wake to the sound of the low voices beyond the screen. A servant girl has burned her hand in the kitchen while lifting a pot too quickly from the iron hook. It is not a disaster, not by the standards of this world, but it is enough to draw concern, advice, and several remedies from every direction. One woman says butter, another says honey, a third says cool water first, unless you wish to cook the hand twice. The suspicious monk, who slept badly and therefore looks more suspicious than ever, says the abbey infirmera may have salve. The noble woman says there is a healer near the forest edge who knows burns, fevers, and the kind of cough that rattles like peas in a dry pod. So after bread, thin ale, and a little cheese that tastes mostly of smoke and survival, you are sent with the servant girl, a guard too young to hide his nerves, and Avis, who has decided to come because someone must make sure men do not turn a burn into a sermon. The dog follows, naturally. He seems to believe every road leads eventually to scraps, and so far history has not entirely disproved him. The path leaves the shrine town by a narrow lane and runs toward the forest, where bare branches knit together under a pale winter sky. Frost still clings in shaded grass. The air smells of wet bark, old leaves, and wood smoke. You pass a little roadside cross hung with a faded strip of cloth. Avis touches it as she goes by. The servant girl carries her wrapped hand carefully against her chest, biting her lip whenever the cloth shifts. The healer's hut stands at the edge of the trees, half cottage, half shed, with bundles of dried plants hanging beneath the eaves. It is a humble place, but busy in its silence. Clay pots sit near the door, a row of onions dries from a beam. A black hen scratches in the dirt with the grave authority of an apothecary. Smoke slips from the roof hole, carrying the bitter scent of herbs. The woman who opens the door is neither witch nor saint, which may disappoint anyone hoping medieval life announces its categories clearly. She's simply old enough to have outlived many opinions, with grey hair covered by a linen wrap, sleeves rolled, and eyes sharp beneath heavy lids. Her name is Isabel. A small iron key hangs from her neck. Around her wrist is tied a thread with 3 knots. Some swear 3 knots combine pain, one for the skin, one for the blood, one for the fear. Others say knots do nothing except remind the healer what she has already promised. Even now, it is hard to tell whether such things work upon wounds, or upon the frightened person carrying them. Inside, the hut is warm, close, and shadowed. Dried herbs hang from every beam sage: rue, betony, yarrow, comfrey, lavender, fennel, mint, and darker bundles you cannot name. A shelf holds clay jars sealed with cloth and wax. There are linen strips, wooden spoons, a mortar dark from years of grinding, a small knife, a horn cup, and a bowl where leeches writhe slowly in cloudy water like tiny living commas. The young guard sees the leeches and goes pale. Isabel looks at him. They are not for you. He nods too quickly. Unless you faint, she adds. Avis smiles into her sleeve. The healer seats the servant girl near the hearth, unwraps the burned hand, and examines it without fuss. The skin is red and angry, blistered in one place but not ruined. Isabel asks how it happened, what touched it, whether ash fell on it, whether the pain is sharp or deep. She washes the hand with clean water cooled in a covered pot. Clean water, you notice, is treated here as carefully as spice. Then she lays honey over the burn, soft and golden, and wraps it in linen. Honey is not merely sweetness here, it is medicine, trade, labour of bees, treasure stored in jars, something used for wounds, coughs, and making bad ale briefly more persuasive. No one can quite agree whether its healing power comes from warmth, purity, divine blessing, or the bees being unusually holy little creatures. Still, Isabel uses it with confidence, and the girl's face eases. The suspicious monk arrives halfway through, breathless from walking too quickly after deciding he ought to supervise. He looks around the hut at the herbs, the leeches, the charms, the hanging roots, and the small painted image of the Virgin near the hearth. His expression suggests he is trying to decide whether the room is pious, dangerous, or simply untidy. Isabel does not bow. She gives him a stool. He sits, perhaps because refusing a stool in a healer's hut might seem prideful, and also because he is tired. He asks whether she uses prayers with her remedies. She says, when needed. He asks whether she uses charms. She says, when needed. He asks who decides what is needed. She says, the sick person, usually. The dead rarely complain clearly. The guard makes a noise that might have been a laugh and hides it badly. You see then the narrow line Isabel walks. Too much skill, and men grow uneasy. Too much prayer, and they call her foolish. Too many herbs, and they whisper. Too little success, and they blame her. Her knowledge lives under watchful eyes, yet people still come, because fever does not wait for permission. Burns do not care about doctrine, and childbirth, coughs, boils, toothaches, sprains, and winter chills all know the path to her door. A woman arrives with a child coughing into a wool sleeve. Isabel listens to the child's chest, warms a little ale with honey and thyme, and tells the mother to keep smoke from the sleeping corner if she can. The mother laughs wearily, because in a cottage with one hearth, telling smoke where to go is like telling mud to be polite. Still, she nods. Advice here is often a candle held against a storm, but people hold it anyway. From another jar, Isabel takes dried willow bark for pain. From the mortar, she grinds sage. She shows Avis a packet of herbs for her sister's sick child, explaining what to steep, what not to boil too long, and when to fetch a priest instead of pretending stubbornness is medicine. That last instruction is given firmly. Folk wisdom, you realize, is not always rebellion against faith. Often it is simply the first hand reached for before the church bell can be rung. Near the wall hangs a charm against fever, a scrap of parchment folded and sewn into cloth, marked with holy names and a cross. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether written charms belong to prayer, magic, medicine, or all three braided together like women's hair. Isabel touches it once while reaching for linen, neither proudly nor secretly. It is just one more thing in a room where people bring fear and hope in equal measure. When you leave, the servant girl's hand is wrapped and resting in a sling. The monk carries himself as if he's found nothing officially wrong, which may be the best verdict he is capable of offering. Avis carries the packet of herbs. The dog has stolen nothing except the black hen's patience. Outside, the forest stands quiet, wet branches shining in the thin light. You look back at the hut and its hanging herbs, its honey jars, its leeches, its prayers, its risky knowledge guarded by an old woman with a key at her neck and knots on her wrist. The medieval world feels less simple with every road you walk. Women heal it, feed it, bargain with it, birth it, mend it, and bury its secrets in thread, smoke, wax, and whispered names. And if men sometimes stand nearby suspiciously, they still come when the fever rises, when the burn blisters, when the child coughs, and when all their certainty has no remedy left. You return from the healer's hut with the smell of honey, sage, and damp forest clinging to your cloak, and for a while the road seems almost gentle. The servant girl walks easier now, her burned hand wrapped in linen and held close. Avis carries her packet of herbs as carefully as if it were a sleeping bird. The suspicious monk says little, which you suspect means he is composing an opinion he can safely revise later. The dog trots ahead, occasionally turning back to confirm that all his slower companions have not been stolen by wolves, saints, or administrative confusion. By late afternoon, however, the sky darkens with low cloud, and a different smell threads through the air. Smoke. Not hearth smoke, not the cosy breath of pottage and damp logs, but sharper, thinner, carried by wind across the fields. You see Avis lift her head. The monk stops fussing with his cloak. Even the dog pauses, one paw raised, nose working. Beyond the next rise stands a small keep, square and grey against the dimming sky, with a timber palisade, a ditch, a cluster of outbuildings, and torchlight beginning to tremble along the gate. It is not a mighty fortress from a tapestry. It is a hard little place built to outstare bad weather, hungry men, and rumours. A banner hangs wet from a pole, too limp to impress anyone. Near the outer ditch, smoke drifts from a burned hayrick, its black ribs still glowing faintly beneath ash. No one can quite agree whether the hay was fired by raiders, careless boys, a lightning strike that no one saw, or a neighbour with old anger and poor timing. Some swear a crow circled the keep 3 times before the smoke rose. Others say crows circle anything that looks like future food. Either way, the gate is barred, and the people inside are not laughing. You approach with the monk, Avis, the servant girl, and the dog, though the dog seems least concerned. At the gate, a woman leans over the timber walk, holding a lantern in one hand and a spear in the other. Her veil is tied back, her sleeves rolled, and her face is lit from below by torch glow, making her look carved from worry and oak. "Name yourselves," she calls. The monk gives his name, the abbey's name, the shrine town's name, and enough holy associations to make the guard beside her shift impatiently. The woman asks what you carry. Avis lifts the herb packet. The servant girl shows her bandaged hand. You mention the healer. The dog barks once, which does not help but feels sincere. At last the gate opens. Inside the keep yard, everything is motion held under discipline. Chickens have been shut into wicker coops. A boy leads goats toward a shed. 2 older women carry sacks of grain from an outer storehouse toward the inner hall. A girl no older than 14 drags a bundle of firewood almost as large as herself, jaw set with ferocious importance. Near the well, 3 servants fill buckets and pass them hand to hand, not because anything burns now, but because if fire comes, water must already be waiting. The lord of the keep is absent, you learn. So are most of the fighting men. They rode out that morning to answer a summons from a neighbouring manor after word came of trouble on the road. Trouble is a wonderfully vague medieval word. It may mean raiders, it may mean armed cousins, it may mean taxmen, it may mean someone has stolen 3 pigs and the pigs are now a matter of honour. In their absence, the lady of the keep rules the yard. She is not dressed for a ballad. Her gown is hitched for walking, her mantle smoke-stained, her keys tied firmly at her belt. She stands beside the hall door, speaking to a steward, a cook, a groom, and a frightened messenger boy whose cap is twisted in both hands. She hears the monk's report, asks where you came from, and sends the servant girl to the kitchen to rest by the fire. Avis offers the herbs. The lady takes them with thanks and hands them at once to an older nurse tending 2 children near the doorway. The children are wrapped in wool blankets, quiet-eyed and pale with excitement. One clutches a little wooden horse. The nurse has tied blue thread around the youngest child's wrist. Some swear blue thread turns away fear, fever, and the evil eye. Others say it only stops the child from scratching at a sore spot. Even now, it is hard to tell whether such threads guard the body or comfort the hands that tie them. You are given work before you can become ornamental. A sack of oats needs carrying, then another, then a chest of linen must be moved from a damp corner, then shutters must be checked, bolts slid, spare candles counted, trenchers stacked, and the kitchen door barred against both danger and ambitious geese. You carry, lift, push, and stumble until your arms recall yesterday's fieldwork and send complaints up your spine. In the storehouse, the lady unlocks a chest with one of her iron keys. Inside lie beeswax candles, salt, dried peas, smoked bacon, folded cloth, and a small packet of spices wrapped in linen. Stores are not merely household goods tonight. They are siege, bargaining, medicine, morale, and breakfast for people who may wake frightened. She counts aloud. The cook repeats the numbers. A maid marks them on a wax tablet with a stylus. Nothing is left to memory alone when fear is in the yard. Outside, torchlight deepens. The burned hayrick smoulders beyond the ditch like a black thought. A messenger arrives breathless at the gate with mud to his knees and news that no one fully trusts. He says armed men were seen near the lower road. Or perhaps only travellers. Or perhaps the miller's sons chasing a stray horse. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, because twilight makes armies out of hedges and suspicion out of every hoofbeat. Still, the lady sends a signal lantern to the upper window. She dictates a message to the monk, whose ink-stained fingers finally become useful. He writes by tallow light while she speaks slowly, the hay burned, the men absent, the stores secure, the gate held. Send word if riders return by the north road. She seals it with wax warmed beside the hearth and gives it to the messenger with a crust of bread, a cup of ale, and instructions sharper than his knife. The hall fills as night lowers. Servants, children, old men, women from the outbuildings, and 2 injured prideful guards gather beneath soot-black rafters. The injured pride comes from one guard slipping in mud while shouting orders and being seen by everyone. No wound bleeds, but his dignity may require poultices. Pottage is served thick with peas and onions. Bread trenchers pass from hand to hand. The dog receives a bone and immediately forgives the entire keep for its anxiety. Near the hearth, the nurse rubs a child's chest with goose grease and thyme against the cold. Avis helps. The lady watches the doors. You sit with your bowl between your hands and understand that war, or the threat of it, does not empty women from the story. It piles more story on their backs. They guard grain, calm children, count candles, hide valuables, direct servants, send messages, tend burns and coughs, shame foolish men into usefulness. And remember which key opens which chest when everyone else hears phantom riders in the dark. Later, from the wall walk, you look over the ditch toward the black fields. Smoke thins under the stars. The distant road lies invisible. Behind you, inside the keep, women bank fires, settle children, check bolts, and keep the household breathing until morning or trouble arrives. The lady stands beside you for a moment, her lantern hooded, her face tired but steady. Men ride out, she says quietly, not bitterly, not proudly. Someone must keep what they ride back to. Then she descends the stair, keys clicking at her belt, leaving you with the cold stone, the torch smoke, the dog's soft steps behind you, and the knowledge that even a small keep at night rests not on walls alone, but on women who know exactly what must not be lost. Night does not fall over the keep all at once. It gathers in corners first, under benches, behind barrels, along the inner edge of the gate where torchlight cannot quite reach. Then it climbs the walls, settles into the rafters, and presses its cold face against every shutter. You remain on the wall walk for a while after the lady descends, listening to the last hiss of the burned hayrick beyond the ditch and the faint shifting of animals in the yard below. No riders come, no raiders either. Only wind, smoke, and the old nervous language of timber in the dark. At last, cold drives you down. The stone stair is slick beneath your hand, and your legs ache from carrying sacks and pretending not to be frightened. The dog follows closely, less brave now that no one is offering bones. In the yard, the torches gutter. A bat flickers once beneath the eaves of the stable and vanishes into the dark like a scrap of burnt cloth. Some swear bats near a doorway mean death, or sickness, or a message from souls that cannot rest. Others say bats mean insects, which is less poetic but often more useful. Even now, it's hard to tell whether old fears follow signs, or signs simply gather around fear like moths around a candle. Inside the hall, most people have settled under blankets along the walls. Children sleep in clusters near the hearth. Old men mutter in dreams. The two guards with injured dignity snore with the confidence of men who believe watchfulness can be delegated to volume. The suspicious monk sits near a dim tallow light, scratching a few last lines onto parchment, his lips moving as if every word must be approved by heaven and grammar alike. But the women are still awake. The lady of the keep moves near the high end, speaking softly with the steward over a wax tablet. Her keys no longer announce her. She has wrapped them in cloth so the sleeping children will not stir. A practical kindness and a clever one. Power does not always need to jingle. Sometimes it moves quietly because quiet is what the hour requires. In the kitchen beyond the hall, the work continues in a red shadow. You follow the smell of smoke and onions through a low doorway and find the cook, two maids, Avis, and the older nurse bending over the tasks that seem too small for such a tense night, yet too necessary to leave undone. The hearth has been banked but not abandoned. A pot of pottage is pushed to the edge to keep warm. Ash cakes are buried in embers for morning. A strip of smoked bacon hangs from a beam. Wrapped in cloth to keep soot off and temptation away. The cook counts loaves beneath her breath. One maid scrapes trenchers, another washes bowls in water gone cloudy from use. A half-burned candle, saved from the feast hall 2 nights ago, stands in a lump of clay near the table. Its flame is small, but everyone guards it as if darkness itself might become expensive. Beeswax is saved for chapel and rank. Tallow is saved because winter is long. Even a candle stub has dignity when the night is uncertain. The cook hands you a bucket and nods toward the yard pump. You had hoped to become invisible. You carry water anyway. Outside, frost has begun to form again. The pump handle bites your palm. The dog watches from the doorway, offering emotional support at a safe distance. Near the stable, a girl carries warm mash to a horse that stamps and blows steam into the dark. She tells you to keep the bucket covered on the way back, because night air can sour water if ill luck is abroad. No one can quite agree whether water truly takes harm from moonlight, bad words, or a jealous glance. But she covers it with a wooden lid all the same. In a world with fever, foul wells, and no patience for waste, caution is cheaper than certainty. Back in the kitchen, the women divide the water carefully, some for washing, some for morning broth, some warmed for the nurse. Nothing is casual. You notice that even fear has not made them careless. If anything, it has sharpened them. Cloth is folded tighter. Knives are cleaned and put away. Ash is drawn over coals in the proper thickness. A door bolt is checked twice. Then the nurse calls for help from a chamber off the hall. You carry the covered bucket with Avis through a passage where the rushes smell damp and old beneath your boots. Behind a hanging wool cloth lies a small room warmed by a brazier, and thick with the breath of children. One child coughs in sleep, another wakes just enough to ask whether the bad men are coming. The nurse says no, not tonight, and you admire how firmly adults can speak when they do not know. In the corner sits a young mother from one of the outbuildings, face pale, hands folded around a string of prayer beads. Her belly is heavy beneath her gown. She is not in labour, not yet, but fear has tightened the chamber around her. The burned hayrick, the absent men, the barred gate, the whispers of riders on the road, all of it has gathered in her body like storm weather. Avis kneels beside her. The nurse warms ale with honey and a little herb from Isabel's packet. The lady comes in quietly, veil loosened, face softer in the dimness. She tells the young woman that the gate is held, the stores are safe, and the midwife in the lower village will be fetched if pains begin. She says it as if she can command the road, the weather, the child, and fate itself to behave until morning. Some swear that frightened mothers should hold iron in the left hand to keep harm away from the unborn. Others say a saint's ribbon tied to the bedpost works better, unless the knot is too tight, because no one wants anything bound at such an hour. Those who tell the tale never fully agree. Tonight the nurse does both. A small iron key is placed beneath the pillow, and a faded strip of cloth touched once to a shrine is tied loosely to the bed frame. Faith and iron keep company without arguing. From there, the night carries you onward, not into battle, but into work. In the laundry shed, 2 women wring damp linen by lantern light because the children need dry cloth if the cold deepens. Their arms twist with steady rhythm, like the washerwoman by the town trough. Steam lifts from a tub. The air smells of lye, wet cloth, and cracked skin. One woman has wrapped her hands in strips of linen, but the water stains them red anyway. She jokes that if saints kept laundry, miracles would be folded square. The other says saints wisely chose clouds. In the barn, a goat has tangled its tether, a maid frees it, scolds it, then checks the door latch against foxes and worse imaginations. Above the beams, another bat stirs. In the chapel corner near the hall, the monk murmurs a prayer before the little travelling relic brought from the shrine town, the doubtful tooth resting in its box. No one knows whether it is saint or horse. Still, a servant pauses to cross herself before returning to the kitchen. Sometimes comfort does not need proof. It only needs a place to stand. The midnight bell sounds faintly from somewhere beyond the fields, perhaps the monastery, perhaps the shrine church, perhaps only memory carrying bronze through cold air. You're too tired to decide. Around you, the keep breathes, shutters creak, embers settle, animals shift, children sigh. Women pass from chamber to kitchen to yard to laundry to barn and back again, quiet as the hidden workings of a clock no one has invented yet. You finally sit near the hall fire, hands aching, eyes heavy. The dog drops beside you and rests his head on your boot. Across the room, the lady of the keep takes one last slow look at the sleeping household. Avis folds the remaining herbs. The nurse tucks wool around the young mother. The cook covers tomorrow's bread. Nothing has happened, you might say, if you did not know better. No attack, no trumpet, no flaming arrows, only night, old fears, bats, bells, saints, superstition, and work that refuses to end simply because the world has gone dark. You understand now that much of medieval life is held together in hours no chronicler bothers to praise, by women whose hands move through shadow, keeping fires alive, water clean, children calm, linen dry, animals shut in, and hope from wandering too far into the cold. Before dawn, the keep lies in a hush so deep that even the old timbers seem to hold their breath. The fires have sunk to red hearts beneath ash. Frost pearls along the inner yard. Somewhere above the stable, a bat folds itself into darkness, finished with its omens for the night. No riders have come, no shouting has broken the road. The burned hayrick beyond the ditch is only a black mound now, breathing one last thread of smoke into the paling sky. You wake near the hall fire with the dog's head still on your boot and your hand stiff around the edge of your cloak. Around you, the household stirs slowly from uneasy sleep. Children blink beneath wool blankets. The nurse checks the young mother, who has rested at last, one palm curled over the small iron key beneath her pillow. The cook lifts ash cakes from the embers. A maid opens the shutter a finger's width and lets in air sharp enough to remind everyone they are alive. Then the bell comes. Faint, far away, carried across frosted fields from the shrine church or the monastery beyond. It rings the morning into being with slow bronze patience. The lady of the keep stands near the door, veil freshly pinned, face pale with weariness and steadiness. Her keys are unwrapped now, quiet no longer, and they click once at her belt as she gives the first orders of the day bread for those at watch. Warm broth for the children. A boy sent to the road. Water drawn before the pump freezes harder. No one can quite agree whether the night was truly dangerous or only full of rumours with long shadows. Some swear they heard horses near the lower road. Others say it was wind in the hedges, or the miller's loose shutter, or fear walking into boots of its own. Even now, it is hard to tell, but the stores are safe, the gate is held, the children are warm, and morning has found the keep still standing. You leave after a bowl of thin broth and coarse bread softened by steam. The lady gives Avis a small bundle of dried peas for her sister's child, and sends thanks to Isabel the healer. The suspicious monk receives a sealed message to carry back toward the abbey, and he tucks it away with the solemn air of a man entrusted with both parchment and breakfast. The doubtful relic tooth, still in its little travelling box, is returned to the shrine servant, who carries it against his chest as though holiness and uncertainty may share the same pouch without quarrelling. At the gate, the dog slips out before you, tail high, as if he alone has planned the route. You step into the dawn behind him. The world beyond the keep is silver with frost. The road lies quiet, rutted, and shining where thin ice has formed in the cart tracks. The burned hayrick smells faintly bitter as you pass. Beyond it, fields open beneath a low pearl sky, and smoke rises from cottages in soft blue threads. Somewhere, a woman calls to hens. Somewhere else, an axe knocks against wood. The medieval day begins not with trumpets, but with chores. You walk with Avis, Elswith, the monk, and 2 servants bound for the shrine road. Your boots are worn with mud from many places now town gate, alehouse yard, manor hall, market square, birth cottage, frozen fields, widow's court, spinning cottage, monastery path, pilgrim bridge, feast hall, healer's hut, keep yard. Each layer has dried, cracked, and been covered by another. You have become, in the most humble sense, well-travelled dirt. The dog trots ahead, then circles back, unwilling to lose his strange flock. He still carries straw in his fur from the alehouse, and perhaps a burr from the wool cottage. Like you, he has gathered evidence. As the road descends toward the shrine town, you see women already moving in the pale light. One bends at a well, hauling water with both hands. Another shakes, rushes from a doorway. A third carries a basket of eggs beneath her cloak, guarding them from cold and elbows. Near a cottage wall, an older woman pins a charm of blue thread to a child's sleeve before sending him out with bread in his fist. Some swear blue keeps away envy, sickness, and sharp glances. Others say children lose fewer charms when the thread is bright. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, and perhaps that is all right. The thread shines anyway. You pass the church porch where pilgrims are gathering again. Badges glimmer, staffs tap stone. Avis touches the linen strip at her wrist, now blessed or comforted, or simply made important by the miles it has travelled. Elswith opens her wooden box for a moment to check the tally stick, the scrap of parchment, the needles, the thread. Her cow is safe for now. Her cottage is hers through winter. Her grief is still hers too, folded carefully among practical things. The shrine servant lifts the relic box toward the church door. No one knows whether the tooth inside came from a saint, a horse, or some bone dealer with excellent confidence. Yet the pilgrims cross themselves as it passes, and you do not laugh. Not now. You have seen too many people live on hope measured in scraps a candle before St. Margaret, honey on a burn, knots untied in a birthroom, a written prayer tucked against the chest, iron under a pillow, a charm tied near a child's wrist. Proof is rare here. Comfort works for longer than proof can stay awake. The suspicious monk leaves you at the fork toward the monastery, where bells wait to divide the day into obedient pieces. He pauses, looks as if he may offer a solemn blessing, then only says, "Mind the bridge." It is, somehow, enough. You continue toward the walled town where this journey began. The gate rises ahead through morning mist, and there, beneath the arch, stands the gatekeeper's wife with her iron keys, exactly where it feels she has always been. The washerwoman is near the trough, red hands already in cold water. From the alehouse chimney, smoke climbs steadily. You imagine the alewife inside, counting chalk marks, judging malt, ruling her smoky kingdom before half the town has rubbed sleep from its eyes. The gatekeeper's wife sees you, sees the dog, sees the state of your boots, and gives the smallest nod. It feels like a medal. You enter under the arch with dawn behind you, and the town waking around you. Market women set down baskets. A girl carries kindling, somewhere in a cottage. Maud the midwife may be sleeping at last, unless another door has opened and another frightened voice has called her name. At the manor, the lady counts candles and grain. At the monastery, Sister Agnes bends over parchment. At the forest edge, Isabel lifts herbs from a beam. At the keep, the lady checks the gate again. You understand more softly now, not completely. A single road cannot teach a whole world, but enough. You could not handle medieval women because they are not one simple story. They are alewives, widows, nuns, healers, mothers, servants, ladies, spinners, washers, market sellers, pilgrims, girls with baskets, old women with keys, and young women learning stillness at dangerous tables. They endure mud, law, childbirth, hunger, rumour, smoke, winter, grief, and work that begins before bells and continues after dark. They do not merely survive the medieval world, they keep it from coming apart. And now the morning grows gentler. You find a place near the alehouse wall where the sun, weak but kind, reaches over the roofs and touches the wet stones. The dog settles beside you with a sigh, his nose tucked under his tail. Smoke rises slowly from chimneys. The bell in the church tower rings again, softer now, as if the bronze itself has grown drowsy. The washerwoman's linen slaps the water, but even that sound seems farther away. A cart creaks past on its repaired wheel. The alehouse door opens, and warm grain scent drifts out into the lane. You sit quietly and let the world loosen its grip. The cold stone beneath you remains cold, but your cloak is warmer than it was. Your hands rest open in your lap. Somewhere, beeswax burns near a chapel image. Somewhere, a child drinks honeyed ale for a cough. Somewhere, a woman ties a knot, unties another, counts coins, folds cloth, stirs pottage, banks a fire, and listens for the next bell. The mist thins over the river. The roofs soften at their edges. The town becomes less a place of hardship and more a low, breathing shape beneath the pale sky. You do not need to solve it. You do not need to master it. You only sit beside it for a little while, hearing the hush between footsteps, the murmur behind shutters, the small patience of people beginning again. The dog sleeps. The smoke climbs. The bell fades. And as the medieval morning settles around you like a wool blanket drawn carefully over tired shoulders, you may let your own thoughts grow slower, dimmer, quieter. The road can wait. The market can wait. The keys, the candles, the doubtful relic, the muddy gate, the women with their strong red hands and hidden kindness, all of it rests now in the soft dark behind your eyes. Nothing more is asked of you tonight. Only breathe and drift and let the fire sink low.